There's this thing that happens when you find out someone has stolen from you. Not a stranger, not some faceless scammer in another country, someone whose handwriting you know, someone whose voice you've been hearing your whole life. What happens is nothing. At first. You just go very still. I remember the exact texture of that moment. I was sitting at my kitchen table. My laptop was open. I had a cup of coffee that had gone cold about 40 minutes earlier, and I hadn't touched it. The refrigerator was humming. My neighbor's dog was barking at something outside. 3 short barks, then quiet. 3 short barks, then quiet, like a metronome. And I was looking at a PDF of a property deed. The address was the house I had been paying for. Every mortgage payment for 6 years. Every property tax installment. The roof repair after the storm in 2019. The new water heater. The driveway repaving. Every single one. The name on the deed was my brother's. Not mine, not my parents', my brother's, Marcus, who had not contributed $1 to that property, who didn't even know what the monthly payment was, who still called our mother every time he needed to change a light bulb. I sat there for a long time, long enough that the dog outside stopped barking and the refrigerator cycled off and the apartment got very, very quiet. And the thing I kept thinking, the thing that I'm almost embarrassed to admit, wasn't how could they do this? It was when did they decide? Because there's a difference. One is about the act, the other is about the planning. The deliberateness. Someone had to call a lawyer. Someone had to sign papers. Someone had to think about what they were doing and decide, yes, do it anyway. That's the part that doesn't leave you. My name is Renata, and this is the story of how I paid for a house and gave my family everything I had, and how they gave the house to someone else, and what I did about it. Okay, so, to understand any of this, you have to understand what my family looked like from the outside, because from the outside, we were a success story. My parents, Emmanuel and Gloria, came here from Lagos in 1989 with 2 suitcases and a phone number for a cousin who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Maryland. My father had an engineering degree that American companies kept finding reasons not to fully honor. My mother cleaned hotel rooms for 3 years until she got a job as a medical billing clerk. They worked. They worked. The kind of working that leaves marks on a person. The kind you can see in how someone holds their shoulders. By the time I was born, 1991, the youngest of what they expected to be 2 kids, then Marcus surprised them. In 1994, they had a rental apartment, a car, and a plan. The plan was simple: get the kids educated, get out of the apartment, and eventually buy a house. Everything in our household was about the plan. I was the kid who understood the plan. I absorbed it like I was made of it. At 11 years old, I was reading my mother's pay stubs and helping her track expenses in a notebook. Not because anyone asked me to. Because I cared. Because I could feel the weight of what my parents were carrying, and I wanted to help carry it. My brother Marcus. Look, Marcus is not a bad person. I need to say that because the way this story ends might make you think he is, and it's more complicated than that. Marcus is the kind of person who was just comfortable. Comfortable being loved, comfortable being taken care of, comfortable letting things happen around him while he smiled that easy smile. My parents called it laid back. I called it something else. But I kept that to myself. I excelled in school. Full scholarship to a state university. Accounting degree. Passed my CPA exam on the first try, which my mother told every person she knew for a year and a half. Got hired at a mid-sized firm in the DMV area. Started at $52,000. Within 5 years, I was at $94,000. By 29, I was clearing over 6 figures. Marcus went to community college, dropped out, worked a series of jobs in retail and then logistics, had a decent enough life, but he wasn't building anything. Not really. He was floating. Here's the thing about being the responsible one in a family. It comes with a set of expectations that are never written down anywhere, that no one ever explicitly states, but that everyone understands perfectly. You succeed so the family can feel secure. You make good decisions so no one has to worry about you. And when the family has a problem, you solve it. The problem arrived in 2015. My father was 61, still working, but showing early signs of a health decline that scared all of us. Elevated blood pressure, some kidney function concerns the doctors were watching. My parents were still renting, they'd hit some hard years in the early 2000s, lost some savings in a bad investment my father's brother talked him into, never fully recovered their footing. They were paying $1,800 a month in rent for a house that had been their home for 12 years, and the landlord had just told them the lease renewal was going up to $2,400. I remember my mother's voice on the phone when she told me. She wasn't crying, that's the thing. My mother doesn't cry, she just gets very quiet in a specific way that means the same thing. We have to figure something out, she said. I was 24, I was making decent money. I had about $30,000 in savings and a good credit score because I had been managing my credit like it was a second job since I was 19. I didn't even deliberate. Not really. I mean, I told myself I was thinking it over, but the decision was already made before I got off the phone. I was going to buy them a house. Now, this is where, looking back, I can see the first place I made a mistake. And I've sat with this a long time, because it's uncomfortable to admit. My mistake wasn't generosity. My mistake was doing it in a way that left no room for accountability, no formal agreement, no paperwork between me and my parents, because in my mind, this was family. You don't write contracts with family. You know who taught me that? My mother. Implicitly, over and over, from childhood. You don't treat family like strangers. You trust. You give. You don't keep score. I know, I started looking at houses in the spring of 2015. I'd visit on weekends, drive out to the suburbs, walk through rooms with my parents. My mother had opinions about everything. The kitchen had to be big. The yard had to have grass, not just concrete. She wanted a separate dining room. My father wanted a garage. Marcus came with us twice and spent most of both visits on his phone. We found the house in October. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a corner lot, which my father loved, a big kitchen with a breakfast nook that made my mother press her hands together in a way I hadn't seen her do since church. The neighborhood was quiet, good schools, even though neither of us had kids yet, close to their mosque, 15 minutes from the hospital system where my father's nephrologist worked, listed at $287,000. We got it for $274,500. I put down $41,000, almost everything I had saved. I took out a 30-year mortgage in my name, my income, my credit, my name. The day we closed, my mother hugged me for a long time. My father shook my hand, and then he held it with both of his, and he said, and I remember this exactly, he said, "Renata, you are the backbone of this family." I thought that was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me. I was 24 years old, and I thought I had done something right. I moved them in on a November Saturday. We carried boxes. We ordered jollof rice from a spot my mother liked. Marcus was there, helping carry things, cracking jokes, making everyone laugh. It was a good day. One of those days you put in a mental folder and close gently. I drove back to my apartment that night with a car full of empty boxes and the warmest feeling I'd had in years. I had no idea what I'd actually signed. Let me walk you through what the next 6 years looked like, because I want you to feel the accumulation of this, not just the number, the actual, practical, physical accumulation. Mortgage payment, $1,340 a month, every month, automatically withdrawn from my account. Property taxes, approximately $4,100 a year, which I paid in 2 installments because it was easier to budget that way. Homeowner's insurance, $1,200 a year. Year 2, the water heater gave out, $1,800 to replace. I paid it without hesitation because of course I did. Year 3, the HVAC system. The technician my father called told them it was on its last legs. Full replacement, $6,400. I put it on a credit card and paid it off in 8 months. 2019, the storm. A major storm system came through in late summer, the kind that sounds like the roof is arguing with the sky. 3 sections of shingles, damaged fascia, a broken gutter system. Insurance covered part of it. The rest, $4,200, came from me. 2020, the driveway. The concrete had cracked and heaved over the winter, and my father kept saying he was worried about tripping. I hired a company. $3,800, 2021, new flooring in the master bedroom. My mother's knees were getting worse, and the carpet was old and hard to clean. $2,100. Are you keeping a running tally? I was. By the end of 2021, 6 years in, I had put approximately $147,000 into that house between down payment, mortgage, taxes, insurance, and repairs. Not counting the furniture I'd helped them buy when they moved in. Not counting the groceries I brought when I visited. Not counting the $200 here, $300 there for this bill or that. And throughout all of this, I want to be very clear, I was never asked. I was never asked, are you okay with this? I was never asked, is this too much? Because it wasn't that kind of family. In my family, when you can, you give. And I was the one who could. Marcus, during this same period, moved into the house. This was 2017, technically supposed to be temporary while he figured some things out. His rent was, wait for it, $0. He contributed to utilities, sometimes. He mowed the lawn occasionally. He was there, present, loved, comfortable, and I don't think it ever crossed his mind to wonder who was paying for the roof over his head. Here's what I want to be honest about, because I think this matters. I was not a saint during these years. I had moments of resentment, private ones. I'd be sitting at my desk at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, working late to earn the income that was covering 3 people's housing, and I'd feel something, not rage, just a tightening, like the inside of a closed fist. But then I'd push it down, because in my mind, this was temporary. My parents were aging, my father's health was unsteady. The plan, my plan, was that eventually, I would get some kind of formal recognition for this. Maybe when I was ready to buy my own place, they'd help me with a down payment. Maybe the house would come back to me someday in some way. I never had a specific conversation about this. I just believed it. I believed it because they were my parents, and I thought that meant we were on the same side. That's not cynicism, that's just what it feels like to realize it afterward. It's not that I was stupid, I was trusting. Those are different things, even though the results can look the same. In early 2021, I started seeing someone seriously. His name was Dominic, an engineer, thoughtful, steady, the kind of man who reads the instruction manual before assembling anything and is completely unashamed of it. We talked about the future. Our future. And part of that conversation, naturally, was housing. I told him I was paying a mortgage on a property in my name where my parents lived. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, very carefully, "Do you have any kind of formal arrangement with them?" And I said, "It's family." He didn't push it, but I remember the look on his face. A kind of careful stillness, like he was noting something down. I should have noted it too. It started with small things, like it always does. Late 2021. I mentioned, in passing, during a Sunday dinner at my parents' house that Dominic and I were thinking long-term. Nothing specific, just we were talking about the future. My mother's response was immediate, and I didn't understand the shape of it until much later. She said, very lightly, "Marcus is not getting any younger either, you know." That was it. Just that. She changed the subject to a cousin's wedding, and I let it go. But it snagged on something in me. January 2022. My father called me, which he almost never did without my mother being on the call, and said he wanted to update some documents. He mentioned something about a will, about making sure things were taken care of. I was supportive. I told him that was a good idea, that he should see an estate attorney, that I could help research one if he needed. He said, No, we have someone. I didn't ask who. I know. March 2022. I asked my mother during one of our phone calls about refinancing the mortgage. Rates had done some complicated things, and I thought it might make sense to look at options. My mother said she'd mention it to Emmanuel. She never brought it up again. When I raised it a second time 2 weeks later, she said, and I want you to notice the language, she said, "Let's not complicate things. Don't complicate things." I started to notice around this time that conversations with my parents were becoming slippery, like trying to pick up something wet. I'd ask a direct question and the answer would somehow be about something else. I'd bring up the house and the topic would change to Marcus's job situation, or my aunt's health, or something I'd said years ago that had apparently landed wrong. I felt crazy. I want to say that directly. I felt like I was losing my grip on basic reality, because on the surface, everything was fine. My parents were warm, they called regularly, my mother still sent me food when I visited, my father still asked about my work, with what seemed like genuine pride. But there was something underneath, a frequency I couldn't quite name. I started journaling around this time, not formally, just notes in my phone. Timestamps, because when things feel uncertain, I go to data. It's how I'm built. So I started documenting, not because I suspected something specific, just because something in me said, write it down. June 2022. A real shift. I was visiting on a Saturday. Dominic came with me. This was maybe the 4th or 5th time he'd been to the house. Marcus was there. It was fine. We had food. We watched something on TV. But at some point, Marcus and my father disappeared into my father's study for about 40 minutes, and when they came back, the atmosphere had changed slightly, like a room when a window closes. I didn't say anything. On the drive home, Dominic said, "Does your brother know how the house is structured, that the mortgage is in your name?" I said I thought so. Probably. Dominic said, "Have you actually ever told him?" I hadn't, not explicitly. I assumed it was understood. In hindsight, God, the things we assume. August 2022. My mother called me on a Wednesday morning while I was at work. I stepped into a conference room. She told me she wanted to talk about the future of the house. I felt a small lift in my chest. Finally, I thought. Finally, we're going to have an actual conversation. She said that she and my father had been thinking, that they were getting older, that they wanted to make sure Marcus had stability. I waited. She said, "We were thinking, since Marcus has been living there and helping us." I want you to notice that word, helping. We thought it would make sense for the house to eventually be in his name, so he's protected. You understand? You're doing well. You have Dominic. Marcus doesn't have what you have. The conference room had a window that looked out over the parking garage. I remember watching a car reverse out of a space while I processed what my mother had just said. I said, Carefully, Mom. The mortgage is in my name. I've been paying for this house for 7 years. She said, I know, and we're so grateful. But the house itself? The family needs the house to stay in the family. As if I wasn't family. I said, I am the family, Mom. It's my mortgage. She said, we'll talk about it more. Don't get worked up. And then she said she had to go check something on the stove. And she hung up. I sat in that conference room for 11 minutes. I know because I have the call log. 11 minutes, just sitting. Listening to the HVAC system and the distant sound of my colleagues' voices through the wall. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the county property records database. Because something had just clicked into place. Some cold, clear, terrible thing. Property records in most U.S. counties are public. Most people don't know this. They think ownership records are private, hidden, complicated to access. They're not. You type in an address, you hit search. The deed information comes up. Who owns it? When it transferred? Who transferred it? I typed in the address, I hit search. The deed had been updated 4 months earlier, April 2022. The property had been transferred via a gift deed from my parents' names. Wait, that stopped me. My parents' names? When had it transferred to my parents' names? I went back further. I pulled the full ownership history. The original purchase in 2015, that was mine, my name as the mortgagee, the buyer, the owner of record. That part was right, except. In 2018, 3 years into this, someone had recorded a quitclaim deed. A quitclaim deed transferring ownership interest from me to my parents. The deed was signed with my name. I didn't sign that deed. I sat with that for a moment. I did not sign that deed. I had no memory of signing anything. I had no memory of being asked to sign anything. The document had my name on it, but I did not put my name on it. From my parents, via the gift deed in April 2022, the property had transferred entirely to Marcus. So the chain looked like this. I bought the house in 2015. Someone used my name to transfer it to my parents in 2018. My parents gave it to Marcus in 2022. The mortgage was still in my name, still being paid from my account. And the deed said Marcus Emmanuel Adebayo. My brother owned a house I was paying for. My brother, who had never made a single payment. My brother, who lived in the house rent-free. My brother, who my mother described as helping because occasionally he drove my father to a doctor's appointment or brought home groceries. My brother owned my house. I want to tell you what I didn't do. I didn't call my parents screaming. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't cry. Which surprised me. I thought I would. I was waiting for it, actually, that wave of emotion, that breakdown. It didn't come. What came instead was something very cold and very clear and very focused. I closed the property records tab. I opened a new browser window. I searched for real estate attorneys who specialize in deed fraud. I made a list. I noted their reviews, their practice areas, their office locations. I chose 3 to contact. Then I went back to my work. I had a client presentation in 2 hours and I needed to be sharp for it. Because here's what my mother miscalculated, and what my brother never understood, and what my father, I think, chose not to think too hard about. I'm an accountant. I work with documents for a living. I understand paper trails. I understand what a signature means and what a forged one means. I understand the difference between a gift deed and a fraud, and I knew, sitting in my apartment that Wednesday afternoon, that what had been done to me was not just a family betrayal, it was a crime. I want to be very clear about what happened next, because I've seen how these stories get told online, and I want to be accurate. What I did was not dramatic. It was not a single explosive confrontation. It was boring, painstaking, careful, paper by paper boring. That's how real accountability actually works. First, I pulled every financial record I had related to that house. 6 years of mortgage statements, bank records showing every automatic payment, credit card records showing every repair, every insurance payment, every property tax installment. I organized them chronologically in a folder, physical and digital, color-coded by category. I am a CPA. This is my language. The total documented expenditure from my accounts to that property between November 2015 and October 2022, $163,400. That's not a rough estimate. That's receipts. That's bank statements. That's to the dollar. Second, I contacted a real estate attorney. Her name was Patricia Osei, a Black woman in her mid-50s who had spent 20 years doing exactly this kind of work. Deed disputes, title fraud, family property cases. I liked her immediately because when I laid out the documents, she didn't look surprised. She looked careful, precise, like a surgeon putting on gloves. She looked at the 2018 quitclaim deed and she looked at me and she said, "Have you ever, at any point, authorized or intended to transfer ownership of this property?" I said no. She said, "Is this your signature?" I looked at the document. The signature looked like mine. It was close, but it wasn't. There was a slight angle to the R that I've never made that way. My R leans left. This one was straight. I said, "That's not my signature." She made a note. She told me what I was looking at. Deed fraud, which is a criminal matter. Unjust enrichment, which is civil. Potentially forgery, potentially fraud upon a financial institution, given that my name was on a mortgage for a property I had been fraudulently stripped of ownership interest in. The words fraud upon a financial institution hovered in the air between us for a moment. She said, "These are serious." I said, "I know." She said, "Do you want to proceed?" I said, "Tell me what I need." Third, I hired a handwriting expert. This sounds extreme. I know. It cost $2,800, worth every cent. She analyzed the signature on the 2018 quitclaim deed, compared it to 12 verified samples of my actual signature from various documents, my tax returns, my employment contracts, my original mortgage closing documents, and produced a 7-page report concluding that the signature on the quitclaim deed was, with high probability, not authored by me. Fourth, I started building a timeline. Every family conversation I could recall about the house I documented. Every phone call. The texts. I went through 2 years of texts with my mother and found, buried in ordinary conversation, small pieces of evidence. My mother referencing the plans we've been making. My mother asking if I'd gotten anything in the mail about the house. One text from October 2021 where she said, and I have this screenshot, "We want to make sure the house is settled the right way." Settled. Past tense, almost, like something that was already in motion. Fifth, I contacted my mortgage lender. I explained that I had discovered a deed transfer I had not authorized. I told them my name was on the mortgage, but the deed had been transferred without my knowledge or consent. I told them I had a handwriting expert's report. The person I spoke to, a manager, after I'd been escalated twice, went very quiet and then said they needed to open an internal review. They opened the review. Now here's where I have to tell you about Dominic. I had told him, after the property records discovery, what I'd found. I laid it out the way I'd laid it out for Patricia. He sat across from me at our kitchen table and he listened, and he didn't say anything dramatic. He just said, eventually, "What do you need?" That was it. What do you need? Not "I told you so," which he could have said, because he kind of did tell me. Not "Your family is terrible," which would have felt good in the moment but wasn't helpful. Just, "What do you need?" I said I needed time to work the process. He said, "Okay, I'm here." I did not tell my parents or Marcus that I knew anything. For 2 months, I continued life as surface normal. I visited on a Sunday in November. I sat in that kitchen, the kitchen my mother loved, with the breakfast nook, and I ate and I talked and I watched my brother sit in a chair in a house that was legally his now, paid for by me, and I kept my face completely even. I am a better actor than I ever knew. What was I feeling during those 2 months? Not rage. Rage would have been easier. Rage is loud, it takes up space. What I was feeling was more like grief, maybe. A very quiet grief for the version of my family I had believed existed, for the parents I thought I had, for the relationship I thought my mother and I had. My mother and I talked twice a week, minimum my entire adult life, every Thursday evening without fail. I'd called her from parking lots, from airports, from the bathroom at work parties. She was my person. I thought she was my person. And she had watched me pay for a house for 7 years and helped scheme to take it from me. That doesn't compute quickly. You don't just flip a switch and accept it. You hold it in your hands and turn it over and try to make it make sense, and it doesn't. And then eventually you put it down and you just do the next thing. The next thing was the letter. Patricia sent the letter in January 2023. It was addressed to my parents and to Marcus, individually. Certified mail, signature required. 3 copies, 3 green return receipt cards. The letter was precise. It outlined the fraudulent quitclaim deed. It cited the handwriting expert's findings. It referenced the total documented financial contribution I had made to the property. It mentioned the phrase fraud upon a financial institution. It mentioned the county recorder's office. It mentioned the word criminal. And it gave them 30 days to respond. My mother called me within 24 hours of receiving it. She didn't acknowledge the certified mail. She called me as if it were a regular Thursday call, asked how I was doing, asked about Dominic, mentioned something about a cousin, and then, very carefully, she said, "I heard from a lawyer." I said, "I know." Silence. She said, "Renata, this isn't necessary, this is family." I said, "I know, Mom." She said, "You're going to tear this family apart over a house." I said, "You transferred my house to Marcus. You did that. I didn't." Here's where she did something I didn't expect. She didn't deny it. She said, and I want you to hear this clearly, she said, "We thought you'd understand. You have so much. Marcus has nothing." As if taking from someone who has in order to give to someone who has nothing is justice. As if she'd conducted some quiet internal means test and decided that my years of sacrifice, my financial discipline, my loan on my name were just surplus, available for redistribution. I said, "Mom, it was my house. You could have asked me." She said, "Would you have given it?" I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Maybe I would have agreed to something. Maybe I would have set up some arrangement. Maybe, I want to believe this, if they had just asked, if they had come to me and said, "We want Marcus to have stability. Can we work something out?" Maybe I would have found a way. But they didn't ask. They forged my name, and they transferred the deed, and they kept cashing the checks. That answer, "Would you have given it?" told me everything. It told me she knew it was wrong. She knew it was mine. She was just betting that my love for her would cover the distance. It had before, but not this time. My father called the next day. His call was different. He sounded tired. He said my name once, then didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he said, "I didn't know about the signature." That landed differently than I expected. I said, "Dad." Who signed it? He was quiet again. Then he said, I don't want to be in the middle of this. I said, You're already in the middle of it. And then, this is the part I come back to, he said, I told her it wasn't right. She said you'd understand, eventually. And he hung up. My father knew. He knew, and he didn't tell me, and he didn't stop it, and he called me the backbone of this family, and he watched me pay that mortgage for 7 years, and he let it happen. I put the phone down on the counter, and I stood in my kitchen for a while, and then I called Patricia, and I said, proceed with everything. The civil suit was filed in February 2023. Unjust enrichment. Deed fraud. The complaint was detailed. It had exhibits, bank statements, handwriting report, property records, text messages, everything. Marcus hired an attorney, first time he'd ever paid for anything related to that house. The mortgage lender completed their internal review and referred the matter to their fraud division. The fraud division contacted county authorities. The county recorder's office opened an inquiry into the 2018 quitclaim deed. And then the calls started. From extended family, aunts I hadn't spoken to in years, a cousin who called to mediate, my mother's church friend, I don't even know how she got my number, who said that whatever was happening was bringing shame on the family and that I needed to forgive and let God handle it. Let God handle the deed fraud, I said. God gave me Patricia Osei. And I ended the call, March 2023. My brother's attorney made a settlement offer. They would pay me back $80,000, a fraction of what I'd put in exchange for dropping all claims. I said no. April 2023. New offer, $110,000, and Marcus would assume the mortgage. I said no. Patricia told me I could hold out. The case was strong. The handwriting evidence alone was significant. The unjust enrichment argument was textbook. She said that in her 20 years, she'd rarely seen documentation this clean. I said, what am I actually entitled to? She walked me through it. Reimbursement for documented financial contributions, potentially the full equity in the property, damages, potentially attorney's fees. Marcus couldn't pay any of this. Marcus had nothing, which meant if we pushed to judgment, the house would have to be liquidated or I'd have to accept the property back. The house. My parents' home. And this is where the story gets complicated in a way I don't want to flatten. Because my father's health had gotten worse. He'd been hospitalized in March with a cardiac event, not a major one, but enough. My mother was 67, and the idea of them losing their home was, I'm not a monster. I want to be clear about that. I spent months being called one, in family group chats that I'd been quietly removed from and then re-added to when someone wanted to send me a guilt message, but I'm not. I wanted accountability, not demolition. But I also knew that if I softened, if I let mercy become a lever they could pull, they would pull it. They had already proven they knew exactly how to use my love against me. So I did something I'm not sure I would have had the courage to do 2 years earlier. I held the line. May 2023. 6 months after the letter, a mediation session was scheduled at Patricia's office. My parents came in with my brother and his attorney. I hadn't seen them since the previous November, at that dinner where I'd kept my face still and eaten jollof rice and watched Marcus in my house. My mother looked older. She'd lost weight. My father walked slowly. Marcus sat with his arms crossed and didn't look at me for the first 30 minutes. I want to tell you what it felt like to be in that room. It felt like grief, like a specific, disorienting grief. because these were the people who taught me everything I knew about love, and they were sitting on the other side of a table from me with an attorney between us. But I also felt, and I want to be honest, I felt clear. The clearest I'd felt in years, because the fog of denial, the fog of maybe I'm imagining it, maybe I'm being unfair, maybe I should just let it go, that fog was completely gone. I knew exactly what was real. Patricia laid out our position methodically. The documented contributions, the handwriting evidence, the fraudulent quitclaim, the mortgage lender's fraud division referral, which had resulted in a formal inquiry that could, if it proceeded to the county DA's office, result in criminal charges. Marcus's attorney kept interrupting with procedural objections. Patricia let him finish each time and then continued. At one point, my mother looked directly at me and said, "Renata, please, just that. Please." I looked at her. I held her eyes. I said nothing. Because I had said everything I needed to say. In documents, in filings, in 6 years of mortgage payments. I had been saying things my whole life, and no one had listened. Now I was saying it in the only language that seemed to work. Marcus, about an hour in, finally spoke to me directly. He said, "I didn't know all of this was in my name. They didn't tell me everything." His attorney immediately put a hand on his arm. But I believe him. Partly. I believe my parents managed information carefully, told Marcus what they thought he needed to know, kept the rest from him so his behavior would remain natural and uncontrived. Marcus's sin is not forgery or scheming. Marcus's sin is 30 years of comfortable obliviousness, of never asking where things came from, of never thinking that the ease of his life might be costing someone else something. That's its own kind of harm, just a quieter one. The settlement we reached, the house would be returned to my name, full ownership. Marcus would vacate within 90 days. My parents could remain in the house, as my parents, as family, not as legal owners, under a formal written occupancy agreement that I drafted with Patricia. An agreement that was clear, that was documented, that was legal. The mortgage would remain in my name because, frankly, that was the only way the numbers worked. In addition, Marcus would pay me $62,000 structured over 4 years, drawn from his wages. This wasn't everything. It wasn't close to everything. But it was documented. It was court adjacent. If he defaulted, we had a mechanism. My parents signed. Marcus signed. My mother left without looking back at me. My father paused at the door, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm sorry." Just that. I nodded. I couldn't say it's okay because it wasn't. I couldn't say I forgive you because I wasn't there yet. I just nodded. And he walked out. I sat in Patricia's conference room for a few minutes after everyone else had left. Patricia poured me a glass of water. She didn't say anything. She's good at that. Knowing when someone needs silence. I drank the water. I looked out the window. A regular street, regular traffic, the world continuing. The deed would be re-recorded in my name within 60 days. I had my house back. I want to tell you what the after looks like, because I think this is the part that gets left out of the stories. The clean, triumphant ending. The villain punished, the hero restored, credits roll. That's not what happened. Or it is, partly, but only partly. The deed was re-recorded in my name in July 2023. My name. My house. Back where it started, except now I had Patricia's number in my phone and a formal occupancy agreement in a folder. Marcus moved out in August. He got a rental with a friend from work. He texted me once, a few weeks after the mediation, just said, "I'm sorry I didn't ask more questions. I read it 4 times. I didn't respond for 3 days." Then I wrote back, "I know. That was all I could give him." My father's health has stabilized. He's still in the house. He and I talk, carefully. We've always been more comfortable in the same room than on the phone, and that's still true. He makes his tea in the morning in the breakfast nook, and I've sat with him there twice since everything happened. We don't talk about it. Maybe one day we will. Maybe we won't. My mother and I are not okay. I want to be honest about that. We talk. We still do our Thursday calls, mostly. But something has changed in the texture of them, and I think we both know it, and neither of us has said it out loud. She has never apologized. Not directly. She's said things like, "I only wanted what was best for everyone, and I hope you know this family loves you." And I've listened, and I've said I know, Mom, because what else is there, really? You can want a direct apology from someone who isn't built to give one and exhaust yourself waiting, or you can choose to be in relationship with them at the level they're capable of. I haven't decided which I'm doing. Maybe both at the same time. What I carry, still, a kind of fundamental readjustment to what I thought family was. Not what it can be. Not the aspirational version. But what it actually is, which is just people. People who love you imperfectly and sometimes make decisions they know are wrong because fear and scarcity override everything else. My mother was afraid Marcus would be left behind. She was afraid in a way that bypassed her ethics. I don't know if I can forgive that. I genuinely don't know. But I understand it. And understanding is different from approval. You can understand how something happened and still say it shouldn't have. You can see the human in someone and still say, "You didn't get to do that to me." Dominic and I are getting married next year. I have a ring and a date and a venue and a mother who cried when I told her, genuinely, happily cried, and a father who hugged me and held me for a long time. And in the back of my mind, during that hug, was the conference room in Patricia's office. The green return receipt cards. The mortgage statements in color-coded folders. Both things are true. That's the thing I'm still learning to hold. The house, my house, is worth $390,000 now in the current market. Equity built over 8 years of payments, in my name, as it should be. I've started thinking about what I want to do with it. Maybe keep it. Maybe sell it. Maybe, someday, I'll sit in that breakfast nook with a cup of coffee that doesn't go cold, and it'll just be a house. A place. Not a symbol of anything. I'm not there yet. Here's the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I'd want to say to anyone who's in the before of a story like this. The warning signs were always there. The slippery conversations, the don't complicate things, the way my questions kept getting redirected, the way my name kept being invoked without my presence. None of these were invisible. I saw them. I just chose to explain them away. Because the alternative, that the people who were supposed to protect me had instead decided to use me, was too heavy to pick up. You can love people and still be wronged by them. Those two things don't cancel each other out. The love is real and the wrong is real, and you have to figure out what to do with both of them in the same hands. What I'd tell my younger self, 24 years old, driving home from that house on that November Saturday, with a car full of empty boxes and a warm feeling in my chest, is not don't do it. I'm not sure I'd tell her not to buy the house. Because the impulse, the wanting to help, the caring, that's not the part that was wrong. I'd tell her, Document everything, not because you're planning for betrayal, but because love deserves to be legible, because generosity that has no record can be erased, because your name means something on a mortgage, on a deed, on a check. And when you put your name on something, make sure no one else's name is quietly being written over it. I paid for a house. The deed said a different name. Now the deed says mine, and I'm still figuring out what that means. Some days it means justice. Some days it just means I know what my family is capable of, and I carry that knowledge like a stone in a coat pocket. Not heavy enough to stop you, but there. Always there. I bought a house for my family, and then I had to take it back. The end. Or not the end. Just the part of the story I know how to tell yet.